Welcome back to the Learning Hub series on APA 7th edition style. This is our final video when we will finally talk about the rules governing end references. We hope that by the end of the series you'll have a strong grasp of APA style and will be able to successfully employ it in your writing for your classes. First, we want to mention that we cover specific information related to document formatting in the second video of this series, which includes the references page. Check that out to learn more about what the paper should look like within your paper. As for what goes into those end references individually, let's get into the basics. APA citation style breaks all citations down into 4 segments of information: the author, the date, the title, and the source. These are placed in this order, but what goes into each segment depends on the type of source you're using and what information is available for that source. The author information can be a person or a list of persons, or an organization or a business. The date should be the date the specific source you're using was published or posted or last updated. The title is the name of the thing you're citing from, and occasionally you may need brackets to further define it if, for example, it's a video or a podcast episode or a white paper or something specific that the title or other information cannot easily determine without the added context. Lastly, the source includes the title of the container, or whatever houses the source you're using, and the location information for your source within that container, which can include a number of elements such as volume or issue numbers, edition numbers, page ranges, or URLs or DOI numbers. We'll get into examples of different types of sources later in this video, but for now remember that these are the 4 segments needed for APA references. Next, let's talk a bit about how to format titles in the references page. Firstly, APA has particular capitalization rules that may be different from what you're used to. Long story short, for the main title of the source you're using, you only capitalize the first word of the subtitle if it has one, and any proper nouns. All other words are lowercased. You can see in the example below we have, quote, why the neutrality of Azerbaijan is important for the European Union, end quote, with why capitalized as the first word, and then Azerbaijan and European Union capitalized because they are proper nouns. For container titles, where your source you're citing is from, it depends on whether it's a periodical or not. Periodical titles like journals, magazines, and newspapers receive title case capitalization, where all words except articles, prepositions, and coordinating conjunctions, unless they begin the title or subtitle, are capitalized. If your source is not from a periodical, then the name of the container receives the same capitalization guidelines as the title of your source, as we just discussed. You can see in the example below, which is a journal article citation, "Incite Turkey" is fully capitalized. Secondly, APA has particular rules when it comes to the punctuation of titles. You do not place quotation marks around titles of works. The only exception is if the title contains a phrase that you would otherwise treat as a quote, which does happen sometimes. You do italicize the titles of longer works, which can include the title you're citing or its container. As you can see in the example below, Incite Turkey is italicized as the journal is the longer work containing the article. Let's also talk a bit about DOIs and URLs. DOIs, or Digital Object Identifiers, are unique strings of numbers and letters that identifies a permanent location for a journal article. In APA citations that call for a DOI number, you always list it in URL format as seen here. If your article does not appear to have a DOI number, you should provide the URL where the article appears. Note that you may need to add retrieved from before it if it would otherwise be hard to track down or if that might change. DOIs might be difficult to locate, but you can often review the page in a database or on a website where that article is housed, or sometimes you can find the DOI number inside the full text of the article. If you're ever not sure, try Googling the title to see if you can find it listed elsewhere, which might list the DOI number. In the box on this slide, you can see an example of how to format an article that does have a DOI and one that does not. Here's a quick example of how to find DOI numbers for your articles. In the screenshot to the left, you can see the DOI number listed underneath the article's title on the page where it's housed online. In the screenshot to the right, you can see the DOI number is listed at the top of the page in the PDF download of the article's full text. Sometimes it's also horizontal on the side or even on the bottom. Sometimes you can get lucky with clicking the Get Citation on the website where the article is housed, but never rely on those for proper formatting. See our first video in this series for why citation generators cannot be trusted. Instead, use them to pick out the pieces you need to build your citations on your own. All right, now it's time to discuss specific types of sources and how to cite them in the references list. Now, we want to note that we cannot discuss every type of source within this video, so we're instead going to focus on the most common types, and from there you can hopefully figure out how to cite others, or else you're always welcome to make an appointment with the Learning Hub to sort out your sources and citations. First, we'll talk about print sources. The two most common types of print sources students might use are books and particular chapters within books. As you can see here, we've provided a template for each from which you can build your citations once you figure out what parts your particular sources have. An entire book needs these parts. Author, formatted as last name, comma, first initial period, second initial period if it has a second initial. Date, formatted as the year in parentheses. Title, formatted with the capitalization rules we discussed earlier, and italics since it's a longer work. And lastly, you need the location information, which for an entire book would just be the name of the publisher. Follow each of these four parts with a period. Note that some books might require other elements, such as multiple authors, an edition number, or a place of publication if it's different from the publisher's main office. In this default example, however, we can see how this template can be transitioned into an actual citation. We have Brors, L period, parentheses, 2019, close parentheses, period. Then in italics, Armenia and Azerbaijan, colon, anatomy of a rivalry, period. Then Edinburgh University Press, period. In the second example, a chapter in a book, you could need these parts. Author, which if you have two would be last name, comma, first initial period, second initial period, comma, ampersand, last name, comma, first initial period, second initial period. Date, formatted again as the year in parentheses. Title, formatted again with the capitalization rules we discussed earlier. And since this is a chapter in a book, it's not formatted any differently as it's a shorter work. Then we need the location information, which in this case would require the book the chapter belongs to and publisher information. So we have in with the name of the book capitalized and italicized appropriately. And then in parentheses we have PP period with a range of pages the chapter appears on in the book. Lastly, we have the publisher name again. So given this template, we have the following example. Gyukajan, comma, O, period, parentheses, 2012, close parentheses, period. Then the title, Ethnic Mobilization and the Emergence of the Karabakh Movement, period. Then the location, which would be in, and then in italics, Ethnicity, Nationalism, and Conflict in the South Caucasus, Nagorno-Karabakh, and the Legacy of Soviet Nationalities Policy. Then immediately after that, before the period, we have parentheses, PP period 129-184, close parentheses, period. Last, we have Ashgate Publishing, period. Next, let's talk about electronic sources. They work in much the same ways, and similarly to the previous slide, we'll only be covering a couple of examples. So for more specific information in different types of sources, check out our additional resources or make an appointment with a tutor in the hub. We have here templates for a page on a website and a journal article from a database. Let's talk about each. A page on a website needs these parts. Author, formatted as last name, comma, first initial period, second initial period, again, if it has a second initial. Date, formatted as the year in parentheses. If your source has a more specific date, by the way, you format it as year, comma, month, day in parentheses. Next, if you have the title, format it with the capitalization rules we discussed earlier, and place it in italics since it's a page on a website and therefore not a periodical. Lastly, you need the location information, which for a page on a website would be the site title the page appears on and the URL. Follow each of these parts with a period. In this default example, we can see how this template can be transitioned into an actual citation. We have Dujarric, comma, S period, then parentheses 2020, comma, September 27th, close parentheses, period. The title is in italics, statement attributable to the spokesman for the Secretary General on the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, period. And then the site name, which is United Nations Armenia, period. Lastly, we have the full URL. In the second example, a journal article from a database, you could need these parts. Author, which would be last name, comma, first initial period, second initial period. Date, formatted again as the year in parentheses. Title, formatted again with the capitalization rules we discussed earlier. And since this is an article from a journal, it's not formatted any differently as it's a shorter work. Then we need the location information, which in this case would require the journal title, placed in italics, and title case capitalization since this is a periodical. comma, volume number in italics, and then immediately after that, parentheses, issue number, close parentheses, if it has an issue number, comma, and then the page range for the article in the citation, formatted as just the numbers with a dash between them. Lastly, we have the DOI number or URL formatted as we described earlier. So, given this template, we have the following example. Gregorian, comma, A period, parentheses 2018, close parentheses period. Then the title, the Karabakh conflict and Armenia's failed transition, period. Then the journal title in italics, nationalities papers, comma 46 in italics, and parentheses 5, close parentheses immediately after it, comma 844-860 period. Lastly, we have the DOI number in URL format. Now let's try out building a citation together. We have here a page on a website. Given that, we can turn to the template we created earlier, and which you're welcome to use yourself for your own citations. So we need author, date, title, and location for a page on a website. We end up with quite a few puzzle pieces to figure out how to put it together. Our answer would be the following. Falco, comma, N period, parentheses, 2018, comma, April 15, close parentheses, period. Then in italics, mapping the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, period. Then the site title, Conflict Analysis Research Center, parentheses, CARC, close parentheses, because that's how they've listed themselves at the top of the website page. Then we list the full URL after it. And there we go. This concludes our series on APA citations. We did not cover everything there is to know about this topic. If we had, it would have run several hours long. We hope it at least gives you a primer for how to approach APA citation and think through formatting in-text citations and end references. If you run into further questions, please contact us through the information on the slide or by using our Make an Appointment form on our website. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful rest of your day.